go. Much better. Much better. What is going on, everybody? Now, the second part is, did it start the schedule or did it start a new live? But I hope you're doing well, Ghost Fam. I don't think it started the scheduled live, sadly. Appreciate you, Sean Bowden. Hope you're doing well. Yep, sure didn't. Oh well. We'll get there. We'll get there. But I hope you're doing well tonight. Started a new one. Thanks, Sean. I am in contact with support, Streamlabs support, and so hopefully they'll be back to me with an answer in no time. We shall see. Yeah, this isn't helping. What's up, everybody? What's going on? Sorry it started a new stream. Thought it was going to stay, but I'm just going to work on dropping this link in the other chat. Appreciate y'all being here. I was really looking forward to this day. Of course, it is the end of a story and the end of a book, which is always exciting. I do have a couple other things on the docket as well to read through tonight. I'm just working on getting this other one taken care of. I'm so sorry that everybody is waiting in the other one. I'm just going to do that. Understand. And then I actually have to come in here so that I can do all the things. I'm missing so many people. And I apologize. What's up, Kevin Klinger? Yeah, hopefully this will be the end of it, because I'm really frustrated with them doing this. I like to keep my channel, schedule them, promote them like everybody else. Lori, Layton. That day's been great. I've had a great day. It's gonna get better just by being here with all of you. Really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you all. Sorry for the stream hop again. Lori, it's good to see you. Work to catch up on and fighting a cold. I'm so sorry. Jessica Parker, it's good to see you. Yes, if everybody wouldn't mind, go ahead and smash that like button. And I am going to give it just a few more minutes. I went ahead and got rid of that other live. Hopefully that will funnel some people into here. Need some MG. Send it my way. MG. Anyway, what's up, Deb? I hope you're doing well. We're here to chill. We're here to relax. RNG. Oh, RNG. It looks like MG from where I'm sitting. I'm sorry, bud. Finally finished the other one. Squirtle. You see him? Sitting on my shoulder. Join us on Thursdays. We do build those. We are building Pikachu right now. All right, there we go. Got some relaxing, some reading coming at you tonight, y'all. We are going to be finishing the Life and Adventures of Santa Claus for all the kids here as well. As myself, I'm totally enthralled in the story. Laura Lovejoy, it's good to see you. Leighton and Layla, special hello to you. Got 6 likes already, 9 people shuffling on in. I'm going to, of course, give it time. I'm just getting the book pulled up so that I can get started when we start. Where did I get these? These came from Amazon, actually. They're just called 4D. If you type in 4D Bulbasaur, I'm sure it'll pop right up. They all will, but there's a Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, and then a Pikachu. Had a horrible night. I'm so tired. Keen for the relaxing stream. Let's do it. McDonald's, waiting for the food. I love it. I love it. Come on. There we go. Book 3, Old Age. That's where we left off. We have a quarter of the book left to go. And then I did get a whole Christmas treasure book. Just got all kinds of Christmas stories in it. Of course, we're going to have to be selective and make sure that they're all in the domain. But, of course, if not, it would be an interesting experiment. But we're going to read probably some tales of the Brothers Grimm, who had translated and reimagined some fairy tales of old. So that should be fun. Were they expensive? They were not expensive. In fact, I would say they average anywhere between $20 and $30. I think I paid 20 for each of these. Okay, once this is done, we will go ahead and get started on our story. I did have, I wouldn't say it was a hard day, it was just a long day and lots of little technical issues happening. And I'm a really big why guy. I'm totally on board with anything and explaining anything and getting people on board so long as I can know the why behind it. So it was a lot of figuring that out today. So a lot of brain power. Oh, I will for sure. Jessica Parker, I will let PokéGhost know that you said hi and have a good Thanksgiving. He is here now, actually. We are hanging out. And after this, we're going to eat some dinner and watch some old cartoons. We're currently going through the original Dragon Ball right now. The one where Goku is still a child of his natural self, as opposed to somebody wishing him into a child, which seems to be pretty popular nowadays. Whoa. No. Yes. We don't eat any fast food, but maybe twice a year we prefer homemade cooking. Absolutely. And I would say I do too. But I'm also a fast food connoisseur. I will eat fast food and I love eating fast food and I really shouldn't. Don't do as I do. You're a smart kid, Leighton. Keep doing what you're doing. Well, hey, Ancient Mew. I hope you're doing well. I am doing good. I'm doing better now that everybody is here. Good to see you, Brangus. Appreciate you being here as always. And yeah, that's gonna go really quick, actually. Hey, what's up, JB? It's good to see you, brother. Nothing better than Chick-fil-A, and I will die upon that hill. All right, that's a pretty solid hill with some pretty good evidence. I'm not too sure what I'm doing for Thanksgiving yet, Jessica Parker. I might see if there's anything happening with Brother Mike's. I don't know if I'll be venturing out or not. It would be nice, of course, to partake in the the foods. But of course, I have this very firm feeling that I will always get leftovers no matter what. Down under. Appreciate you. Yeah, absolutely. Lurking is permitted, especially on Mondays. I'm around. Just gonna be watching, kind of not feeling well. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that, Mew. Oh, I will for sure. That pupper gets hugged so much. Out of nowhere, too. She could be sleeping and I'll sneak attack hug. Hug session. Got 6 people here already. We'll just give it another couple moments for anyone that is trickling in. 8 likes already. Only 10 minutes. I'm sure your Nana's cooking is amazing, Leighton and Layla. So we are going to be finishing up Frank Baum's Book of Santa Claus, The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. We're on book 3 in this one, which is Old Age. And we'll start at the 12-minute mark here. But I hope you all had a beautiful Monday. Hope you were looking forward to this as much as I was. Excellent. I'm drinking caramel macchiato. What flavor are you drinking? Surprise, you're not drinking Monster tonight, bro. No, I left the Monsters at work. I just finished a fruit punch Monster, actually. Dr. Pepper, let's go. But for reading, it just always felt right to have coffee or tea while you're reading, especially to an audience. So, coffee wine shop in South Dakota, let's go. That sounds like a very interesting combo. Coffee flavored wine. I know not together, but just an interesting thought. I feel one of those chews coming. All right. Laura Lovejoy. Matt Gooch. Ew. Needs to be eggnog milk or Pepsi Zero Cherry. Eggnog. It's starting to get into the season of eggnog, that's for sure. Gotta change this. It's not together, it's separate, but they sold both. Awesome. Is there everyone waiting all day for story time with you, Uncle Kev? We're ahead a day. It's Tuesday afternoon. Gotcha. Excellent. And I appreciate you being here, y'all. Thank you all so much. Got 7 people in here, 10 likes. Let's go. Let's go ahead and get into book 3, Old Age, and see how long we're going tonight. Ew, gross. No eggnog. Mrs. 5150, I hope you're doing well tonight. Ready for story time? And Alec, it's good to see you as well, man. 11 likes. Let's go. You're just on time. We're just about to start book 3, Old Age. Old Age of the Life of Santa Claus. All right, here we go. The Mantle of Immortality. And now we come to a turning point in the career of Santa Claus, and it is my duty to relate the most remarkable that has happened since the world began or mankind was created. We have followed the life of Claus from the time he was found, a helpless infant, by the wood nymph Necile, and reared to manhood in the great forest of Berzy, and we know how he began to make toys for children and how, within the assistance and goodwill of the immortals, he was able to distribute them to the little ones throughout the world. For many years he carried on this noble work, for the simple, hard-working life he led gave him perfect health and strength. And doubtless a man can live longer in the beautiful Laughing Valley, where there is no cares and everything is peaceful and merry, than in any other part of the world. But when many years had rolled away, Santa Claus grew old. The long beard of golden brown that once covered his cheeks and chin gradually became gray and finally turned to a pure white. His hair was white too, and there were wrinkles at the corner of his eyes, which showed plainly when he laughed. He had never been a very tall man, and now he became fat and waddled very much like a duck when he walked. But in spite of these things, he remained as lively as ever, and was just as jolly and gay, and his kind eyes sparkled as brightly as they did that first day when he came to the Laughing Valley. Yet a time is sure to come when every mortal who has grown old and lived his life is required to leave this world for another. So it is no wonder that, after Santa Claus had driven his reindeer on many and many a Christmas Eve, those staunch friends finally whispered among themselves that they had probably drawn his sledge for the last time. Then all the forest of Burzee became sad, and all the Laughing Valley was hushed, for every living thing that had known Claus had used to love him, and to brighten at the sound of his footsteps or the notes of his merry whistle. No doubt the old man's strength was at last exhausted, for he made no more toys, but lay on his bed, as in a dream. The nymph Necile, who had reared him and been his foster mother, was still youthful and strong and beautiful, and it seemed to her but a short time since this aged, gray-bearded man had lain in her arms and smiled at her with his innocent baby lips. In this is shown the difference between mortals and immortals. It was fortunate that the great Ak came to the forest at this time. Necile sought him with troubled eyes and told him of the fate that threatened their friend Claus. At once the master became grave, and he leaned upon his axe and stroked his grizzled beard thoughtfully for many minutes. Then suddenly he stood up straight and poised his powerful head with firm resolve, and stretched out his great right arm as if determined on doing some mighty deed. For the thought had come to him so grand in its conception that all the world might well bow before the master woodsman and honor his name forever. It is well known that when the great Ak once undertakes to do a thing, he never hesitates an instant. Now he summoned his fleetest messengers, and sent them in a flash to many parts of the earth. And when they were gone, he turned to the anxious Necile and comforted her, saying, "Be good of heart, my child. Our friend still lives. And now run to your queen and tell her that I have summoned a council of all immortals of the world to meet with me here in Burzee this night. If they obey and hearken unto my words, Claus will drive his reindeer for countless ages yet to come." At midnight, there was a wondrous scene in the ancient forest of Burzee, where for the first time in many centuries the rulers of the immortals who inhabit the earth were gathered together. There was the queen of the water sprites, whose beautiful form was so as clear as crystal, but continually dripped water on the bank of moss where she sat. And beside her was the king of the sleep fays, who carried a wand from the end of which a fine dust fell all around, so that no mortal could keep awake long enough to see him, as mortal eyes are sure to close in sleep as soon as the dust filled them. And next to him sat the Gnome King, whose people inhabit all the region under the earth's surface, where they guard the precious metals and the jewel stones that lie buried in rock and ore. At his right hand stood the king of the sound imps, who had wings on its feet, for his people are swift to carry all sounds that are made. When they are busy, they carry the sounds but short distances, for there are many of them, but sometimes they speed with the sounds to places miles and miles away from where they are made. The king of the sound imps had an anxious and careworn face, for most people have no consideration for his imps, and especially the boys and girls make a great many unnecessary sounds which the imps are obliged to carry when they might be better employed. The next in the circle of the immortals was the king of the wind demons, slender frame, restless and uneasy at being confined to one place for even an hour. Once in a while he would leave his place and circle around the glade, and each time he did this the fairy queen was obliged to untangle the flowing locks of her golden hair and tuck them back of her pink ears. But she did not complain, for it was not often that the king of the wind demons came into the heart of the forest. After the fairy queen, whose home, was in Old Burzee, came the king of the light elves, with his two princes, Flash and Twilight, at his back. He never went anywhere without his princes, for they were so mischievous that he dared not let them wander alone. Prince Flash bore a lightning bolt in his right hand and a horn of gunpowder in his left, and his bright eyes roved constantly around as if he longed to use his blinding flashes. Prince Twilight held a great snuffer in one hand and a big black cloak in the other, and it is well known that unless Twilight is carefully watched, the snuffers or the cloak will throw everything into darkness, and darkness is the greatest enemy the King of the Light Elves has. In addition to the immortals, I have named where a King of the Nooks, who had come from his home in the jungles of India, and the King of the Ryls, who lived among the gay flowers and the luscious fruits of Valencia. Sweet Queen Zerline of the wood nymphs completed the circle of the immortals. But in the center of the circle sat three others who possessed powers so great that all the kings and queens showed them reverence. These were Ak, the master woodsman of the world, who rules the forests and the orchards and the groves, and Kern, the master husbandman of the world, who rules the grain fields and the meadows and the gardens, and Bo, the master mariner of the world, who rules the seas and all the craft that float thereon. And all other immortals are more or less subject to these three. When all had assembled, the master woodsman of the world stood up and addressed them, since he himself had summoned them to the council. Very clearly, he told them the story of Claus, beginning at the time when he was a babe, he had been adopted as a child of the forest, and telling of his noble and generous nature, and his lifelong labors to make children happy. And now, said Ak, when he had won the love of all the world, the spirit of death is hovering over him. Of all men who have inhabited the earth, none other so well deserves immortality, for such a life cannot be spared so long as there are children of mankind to miss him and to grieve over his loss. We immortals are the servants of the world, and to serve the world we were permitted in the beginning to exist. But what one of us is more worthy of immortality than this man Claus, who so sweetly ministers to the little children? He paused and glanced around the circle to find every immortal listening to him eagerly and nodding approval. Finally, the king of the wind demons, who had been whistling softly to himself, cried out, "What is your desire, O Ak?" "To bestow upon Claus the mantle of immortality," said Ak boldly. That this demand was wholly unexpected was proved by the immortals springing to their feet and looking into each other's face with dismay, and then upon Ak with wonder, for it was a grave matter, this parting with the mantle of immortality. The queen of the water sprites spoke in her low, clear voice, and the words sounded like raindrops splashing upon the windowpane. "In all the world, there is but one mantle of immortality," she said. The king of the sound phase added, "and has existed since the beginning, and no mortal has ever dared to claim it." And the master mariner of the world arose and stretched his limbs, saying, "Only by the vote of every immortal can it be bestowed upon a mortal." "I know all of this," answered Ak quietly, "but the mantle exists, and if it was created, as you say, in the beginning, it was because the Supreme Master knew that some day it would be required. Until now, no mortal has deserved it, but who among you dares deny the good Claus deserves it? Will you not all vote to bestow it upon him?" They were silent, still looking upon one another questioningly. "Of what use is the mantle of immortality unless it is worn?" demanded Ak. "What will it profit any of us to allow it to remain in its lonely shrine for all time to come?" "Enough!" cried the Gnome King abruptly. We will vote on this matter, yes or no. For my part, I say yes. And I, said the Fairy Queen promptly, and Ak rewarded her with a smile. My people in Brazil tell me they have learned to love him, therefore I vote to give Claus the mantle, said the King of the Rows. He is already a comrade of the Nooks, announced the ancient king of that band. Let him have immortality. Let him have it. Let him have it, sighed the king of the wind demons. Why not? Asked the king of the sleep phase. He never disturbs the slumber. My people allow humanity. Let the good Claus be immortal. I do not object, said the king of the sound imps. Nor I, murmured the queen of the water sprites. If Claus does not receive the mantle, it is clear none other can ever claim it, remarked the king of the light elves. So let us have done with the thing for all time. The wood nymphs were first to adopt him, said Queen Zerline. Of course I shall vote to make him immortal. He is already... Ak now turned to the master husbandman of the world, who held up his right arm and said, Yes. And the master mariner of the world did likewise, after which Ak, with sparkling eyes and smiling face, cried out, I thank you, fellow immortals, for all have voted yes, and so to our dear Claus shall fall the one mantle of immortality that it is in our power to bestow. Let us fetch it at once, said the Fay King. I'm in a hurry. They bowed, they bowed assent, and instantly the forest glade was deserted. But in a place midway between the earth and the sky was suspended a gleaming crypt of gold and platinum, aglow with soft light shed from the facets of countless gems. Within a high dome hung a precious mantle of immortality, and each immortal placed a hand on the hem of the splendid robe and said, as with one voice, We bestow this mantle upon Claus, who called the patron saint of children. Ak now turned to the master husbandman. Sorry, it's not turning pages. At this, the mantle came away from this lofty crypt, and they carried it to the house in the Laughing Valley. The spirit of death was crouching very near to the bedside of Claus, and as the immortals approached, she sprang up and motioned them back with an angry gesture. But when her eyes fell upon the mantle they bore, she shrank away with a low moan of disappointment and quitted that house forever. Softly and silently the immortal band dropped upon Claus the precious mantle, and it closed about him and sank into the outlines of his body and disappeared from view. It became part of his being, and neither mortal nor immortal might ever take it from him. Then the kings and queens who had wrought this great deed dispersed to their various homes, and all were well contented that they had added another immortal to their band. And Claus slept on, the red blood of everlasting life coursing swiftly through his veins, and on his brow was a tiny drop of water that had fallen from the ever-melting glow of the queen of the water sprites. And over his lips hovered the tender kiss that had been left by the sweet nymph Necile, for she had stolen in when the others were gone to gaze with rapture upon the immortal form of her foster son. Ooh. She'll be fine. The med's probably upset her stomach. She's not better by Wednesday. Call the vet again. Oh, I'm sorry, Laura. Kara, I hope you're doing well, Kara. It's good to see you. Alice, it's good to see you. Got stung by a bee on the face. Oh. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's scary. Yeah, that is scary. Yes, it is good to see you, Kara, and everybody. That was a... Okay, so Claus has got immortality now. That makes a lot more sense. Now we get into Chapter 2 of Book 3, When the World Grew Old. Got 17 people in here watching, 17 likes, the math be mathin'. Yeah, I can imagine. Well, my heart and thoughts go out, and I'm hoping for speedy recovery for sure. What's up, Mystic Star? Rap Philosophy, happy Monday. I hope you're doing well, brother. Surely he was. 18 likes. Thanks, Ernie. Appreciate you. When the world grew old. The next morning, when Santa Claus opened his eyes and gazed around the familiar room, which he had feared he might never see again, he was astonished to find his old strength renewed, and to feel the red blood of perfect health coursing through his veins. He sprang from his bed and stood where the bright sunshine came in through his window and flooded him with its merry, dancing rays. He did not then understand what had happened to restore to him the vigor of youth. But in spite of the fact that his beard remained the color of snow and that wrinkles still lingered in the corners of his bright eyes, old Santa Claus felt as brisk and merry as a boy of 16, and was soon whistling contentedly as he busied himself fashioning new toys. Then Ak came to him and told of the mantle of immortality, and how Claus had won it through his love for the little children. It made old Santa look grave for a moment to think he had been so favored, but it also made him glad to realize that now he need never fear being parted from his dear ones. At once he began preparations for making a remarkable assortment of pretty and amusing playthings, and in larger quantities than ever before. For now that he might always devote himself to the works, he decided that no child in the world, poor or rich, should hereafter go without a Christmas gift if he could manage to supply it. The world was new in the days when dear old Santa Claus first began toy making and won, by his loving deeds, the mantle of immortality. And the task of supplying cheering words, sympathy, and pretty playthings to all the young of his race did not seem a difficult undertaking at all. But every year more and more children were born into the world, and these, when they grew up, began spreading slowly over the faces of the earth, seeking new homes, so that Santa Claus found each year that his journeys must extend further and further from the Laughing Valley, and that the packs of toys must be made larger and ever larger. So at length he took counsel with his fellow immortals, how his work might keep pace with the increasing number of children, that none might be neglected. And the immortals were so greatly interested in his labors that they gladly rendered him their assistance. Ak gave him his man-kilter, the silent and swift, and the Nook Prince gave him Peter, who was more crooked and less surly than any of his brothers, and the Rile Prince gave him Nutter, the sweetest tempered Rile ever known, and the Fairy Queen gave him Whisk, that tiny, mischievous, but lovable fairy who knows today almost as many children as Santa Claus himself. With these people to help make the toys and to keep his house in order and to look after the sledge and the harness, Santa Claus found it much easier to prepare his yearly load of gifts, and his days began to follow one another smoothly and pleasantly. Yet after a few generations his worries were renewed, for it was remarkable how the number of people continued to grow, and how many more children there were every year to be served. When the people filled all the cities and lands of one country, they wandered into another part of the world, and the men cut down the trees in many of the great forests that had been ruled by Ak, and with the wood they built new cities. And where the forest had been were fields of grain and herds of browsing cattle. You might think the Master Woodsman would rebel at the loss of his forest, but not so. The wisdom of Ak was mighty and far-seeing. "The world was made for man," he said to Santa Claus, "and I have but guarded the forest until man needed them for their use. I am glad my strong trees can furnish shelter for men's weak bodies and warm them through the cold winters. But I hope they will not cut down all the trees, for mankind needs the shelter of the woods in summers as much as the warmth of the blazing logs in winter. And however crowded the world may grow, I do not think men will ever come to the Burzee, nor to the great black forest, nor to the wooded wilderness of Braz, unless they seek their shades for pleasure and not to destroy their giant trees. By and by, people made ships from the tree trunks and crossed over oceans and built cities in far lands. But the oceans made little difference to the journeys of Santa Claus. His reindeer sped over the waters as swiftly as over the land, and his sledge headed from east to west and followed in the wake of the sun, so that as the earth rolled slowly over, Santa Claus had all 24 hours to encircle it. Each Christmas Eve and the speedy reindeer enjoyed these wonderful journeys more and more. So year after year, and generation after generation, and century after century, the world grew older, and the people became more numerous, and the labors of Santa Claus steadily increased. The fame of his good deeds spread to every household where children dwelt, and all the little ones loved him dearly, and the fathers and mothers honored him for the happiness he had given them when they were too young. And the aged grandsires and granddames remembered him with tender gratitude and blessed his name. That's the end of that chapter. 95th birthday this week. That's incredible. It's good to see everybody. Absolutely, Laura. Hey, Mama. Yes, I hope you start feeling better, Mama. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. I hope you sleep well. I hope I'm able to help put you to sleep. But as always, it is really good to see you, Mama. And we're going to get into Chapter 3 of Book 3, which is the Deputies of Santa Claus. 17 people in, 18 likes. Absolutely loving it. Perfect Monday night. However, there was one evil following in the path of civilization that caused Santa Claus a vast amount of trouble before he discovered a way to overcome it. But fortunately, it was the last trial he was forced to undergo. One Christmas Eve, when his reindeer had leaped to the top of a new building, Santa Claus was surprised to find that the chimney had been built much smaller than usual. But he had no time to think about it just then, so he drew in his breath and made himself as small as possible and slid down the chimney. I ought to be at the bottom of this time. I ought to be at the bottom by this time, he thought, as he continued to slip downward, but no fireplace of any sort met his view. And by he reached the very end of the chimney, which was in the cellar. This is odd, he reflected, much puzzled by this experience. If there's no fireplace, what on earth is the chimney good for? Then he began to climb out again and found it hard work, the space being so small. And on his way up he noticed a thin round pipe sticking through the side of the chimney, but could not guess what it was for. Finally he reached the roof and said to the reindeer, "There is no need of my going down that chimney, for I could find no fireplace through which to enter the house. I fear the children who live there must go without playthings this Christmas." Then he drove on, and soon came to another new house with a small chimney. This caused Santa Claus to shake his head doubtfully. But he tried the chimney, nevertheless, and found it exactly like the other. Moreover, he nearly stuck fast in the narrow flue and tore his jacket trying to get out again. So, although when he came to several such chimneys that night, he did not venture to descend any more of them. "What in the world are people thinking of to build such useless chimneys?" he exclaimed. "In all the years I have traveled with my reindeer, I have never seen the like before." True enough. But Santa Claus had not then discovered that stoves had been invented and were fast coming into new use. When he did find out, he wondered how the builders of those houses could have so little consideration for him, when they knew very well it was his custom to climb down chimneys and enter houses by way of the fireplaces. Perhaps the men who built those houses have outgrown their own love of toys and were indifferent whether Santa Claus called on their children or not. Whatever the explanation might be, the poor children were forced to bear the burden of grief and disappointment. The following year, Santa Claus found more and more of the new-fashioned chimneys. Sorry. That had no fireplaces. And the next year, still more. And third year, so numerous had the narrow chimneys become, he even had a few toys left in his sledge that he was unable to give away because he could not get to the children. The matter had now become so serious that it worried the good man greatly. He had decided to talk it over with Kilter and Peter and Nutter and Whisk. Kilter, already knew something about it, for it had been his duty to run around to all the houses just before Christmas and gather up the notes and letters to Santa Claus the children had written, telling what they wished put in their stockings or hung on their Christmas trees. But Kilter was a silent fellow, and seldom spoke of what he saw in the cities and villages. The others were very indignant. Those people act as if they do not wish their children to be happy, said sensible Peter, in a vexed tone. The idea of shutting out such a generous friend to their little ones. But it is my intention to make children happy whether their parents wish it or not, returned Santa Claus. Years ago, when I first began making toys, children were even more neglected by parents than they are now. So I have learned to pay no attention to thoughtlessness or selfish parents, but to consider only the longings of childhood. You are right, my master, said Nutter the Rile. Many children would lack a friend if you did not consider them and try to make them happy. Then, declared the laughing Whisk, we must abandon any thought of using these new-fashioned chimneys, but become burglars and break into the houses some other way. What way? Asked Santa Claus. Why, walls of brick and wood and plaster are nothing to fairies. I can easily pass through them whenever I wish, and so can Peter and Nutter and Kilter. Is that not so, comrades? I often pass through walls when I gather up the letters, said Kilter. And that was a long speech for him, and so surprised Peter and Nutter that their round, big eyes nearly popped out of their head. Therefore, continued the fairy, you may as well take us with you on your next journey, and when we come to one of those houses with stoves instead of fireplaces, we will distribute the toys to the children without the need of using a chimney. That seems to me a good plan, replied Santa Claus, well pleased at having solved the problem. We will try next year. That is how the fairy, the pixie, the Nook, and the Rile all rode in the sledge with the master the following Christmas Eve, and they had no trouble at all in entering the new-fashioned houses and leaving toys for the children that lived in them. And their deft services not only relieved Santa Claus of much labor, but enabled him to complete his own work more quickly than usual, so that the merry party found themselves at home with an empty sledge a full hour before daybreak. The only drawback to the journey was that the mischievous Whisk persisted in tickling the reindeer with a long feather to see them jump, and Santa Claus found it necessary to watch him every minute and to tweak his long ears once or twice to make him behave himself. But, taken altogether, the trip was a great success, and to this day the four little folk always accompany Santa Claus on this yearly ride and help him distribute his gifts. But the indifference of parents, which had so annoyed the good saint, did not continue very long, and Santa Claus soon found that they were really anxious he should visit their homes on Christmas Eve and leave presents for their children. So, to lighten his task, which was fast becoming very difficult indeed, old Santa decided to ask the parents to assist them. Get your Christmas trees all ready for my coming, he said to them, and then I shall be able to leave the presents without loss of time, and you can put them on the trees when I am gone. And to the others he said, see that the children's stockings are hung up in readiness for my coming, and then I can fill them as quick as a wink. And often, when parents were kind and good-natured, Santa Claus would simply fling down his package of gifts and leave the fathers and mothers to fill the stockings after he had darted away in the sledge. I will make all loving parents my deputies, cried the jolly old fellow, and they shall help me do work, for in this way I shall save many precious minutes, and few children need be neglected for lack of time to visit them. Besides carrying around a big packs and a swift flying sledge, old Santa began to send great heaps of toys to the toy shops, so that if parents wanted larger supplies for their child, they could easily get them. And if children were by chance missed by Santa Claus on his yearly rounds, they could go to the toy shops and get enough to make them happy and contented. For the loving friend of the little ones decided that no child, if he could help it, should long for toys in vain. And the toy shops also proved convenient whether a child fell ill and needed a new toy to amuse it, and sometimes on birthdays the fathers and mothers go to the toy shops to get pretty gifts for their children in honor of the happy event. Perhaps you will now understand how, in spite of the bigness of the world, Santa Claus is able to provide and supply all the children with beautiful gifts, to be sure. The old gentleman is rarely seen in these days, but it is not because he tries to keep out of sight, I assure you. Santa Claus is the same loving friend of children that in the old days used to play and romp with them by the hour, and I know he would love to do the same now if he had the time. But, you see, he is so busy all year making toys and so hurried on that one night when he visits our home with his packs that he comes and goes among us like a flash, and it is almost impossible to catch a glimpse of him. And although there are millions and millions more children in the world than there used to be, Santa Claus has never been known to complain of their increasing numbers. The more the merrier, he cries with his jolly laugh, and the only difference to him is the fact that his little workmen have to make their busy fingers fly faster every year to satisfy the demands so many little ones. In all this world there is nothing so beautiful as a happy child, says good old Santa Claus. And if he had his way, the children would all be beautiful for the world be happy. Would all be beautiful for all the world, for all would be happy. Yeah, that's what it says. Excellent. All right. Well, that was the end of that book, The Life and Adventure of Santa Claus. Kitty-O Game. What's going on, Kitty-O? It's good to see you, fam. Appreciate the raid, brother. I'm getting raided. Yes, I am. I appreciate you. What's going on, boy? Sven, how's it going? The Rock, it's good to see you. Fruit in the bottom, everyone's talking about the fruit do you leave? Rod, Kitty Gang, Pokey Francis, how's it going? It's good to see you, Francis. Jack, Thomas, appreciate you coming through on the raid. You are rating the reading stream of Kev the PokéGhost. Appreciate you coming in, Kitty-O, Daddy-O. 26 likes, 24 peeps coming on in with the raid. 28 now. Welcome in, Raiders. Really appreciate y'all. We are in our relax and read phase, so we are reading stories tonight. Figured we'd keep it in the holiday theme, and we just finished The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, and now we're going to read another story called A Kidnapped Santa Claus. I have no idea what it's about, but it's by Frank L. Baum. Revelations. I reckon that's in the public domain. But really appreciate y'all coming through. Smash that like button, y'all. Grab your favorite hot beverage, whether it be coffee or tea. Chaos, what's going on? Just wanted to drop by, drop a like, show some love before I go live. I hope you're having a good stream. Stay blessed, y'all. Appreciate you, Chaos. Don't know if you're still here, but really appreciate you. Thori. Love it, love it, love it. Just going back and reading things I might have missed, y'all. Appreciate y'all. Heavy D, how's it going? It's good to see you, fam. Floyd. Appreciate y'all smashing the like. I haven't seen Kitty-O yet. Did anybody see Kitty-O or Daddy-O? I didn't see him, but Kitty-O, Daddy-O, really, really appreciate you coming through, bringing your viewers on over. Of course, they are in good hands if they do want to chill out, relax, read a story, and just, get ready for a night's sleep. We're actually about to start a brand new story, and this one is just called A Kidnapped Santa Claus. So, I hope you enjoy. I've never read it before, so we'll see exactly what it is. Santa Claus lives in the Laughing Valley, where stands the big rambling castle in which his toys are manufactured. His workmen, selected from the Rowls, Knooks, Pixies, and Fairies, live with him, and everyone is as busy as can be from one year's end to another. It is called the Laughing Valley because everything there is happy and gay. The brooks chuckle itself as it leaps rollickingly between its green banks. The wind whistles merrily in the trees, the sunbeams dance lightly over the soft grass, and the violets and wildflowers look smilingly up from their green nests. To laugh, one needs to be happy. To be happy, one needs to be content. And throughout the Laughing Valley of Santa Claus, contentment reigns supreme. On one side is the mighty forest of the Burzee. At the other side stands the huge mountain that contains the caves of the demons, and between them the valley lies smiling and peacefully. One would think that our good old Santa Claus, who devotes his days to making children happy, would have no enemies on all the earth. And, as a matter of fact, for a long period of time he encountered nothing but love wherever he may go. But the demons who lived in the mountain caves grew to hate Santa Claus very much, and all for the simple reason that he made children happy. The caves of the demons are 5 in number. A broad pathway leads up to the first cave, which is a finely arched cavern at the foot of the mountain, an entrance being beautifully carved and decorated. In it resides the demon of selfishness. Back of this is another cavern inhabited by the demon of envy. The cave of the demon of hatred is next in order, and through this one passes to the home of the demon of malice, situated in a dark and fearful cave in the very last heart of the mountain. I do not know what lies beyond this. Some say there are terrible pitfalls leading to death and destruction, and this may very well be true. However, from each one of the 4 caves mentioned, there is a small, narrow tunnel leading to the 5th cave, a cozy little room occupied by the demon of repentance. And as the rocky floors of these passages are well worn by the track of passing feet, I judge that many wanderers of the cave of the demons have escaped through the tunnels to the abode of the demon of repentance, who is said to be a pleasant sort of fellow who gladly opens for one a little door admitting you to the fresh air and sunshine again. Well, these demons of the caves, thinking that they are great cause to dislike old Santa Claus, held a meeting one day to discuss the matter. "I am really getting lonesome," said the demon of selfishness, "for Santa Claus distributes so many pretty Christmas gifts to all the children that they become happy and generous through his example and keep away from my cave." "I have the same trouble," rejoined the demon of envy. "The little ones seem quite content with Santa Claus, and there are few indeed that I can coax into becoming envious." "And that makes it bad for me," declared the demon of hatred. "For if no child pass through the caves of selfishness and envy, none can get to my cavern." "Or to mine," added the demon of malice. "For my part," said the demon of repentance, "it is easily seen that if children do not visit your caves, they have no need to visit mine, so that I am quite as neglected as you are." "And all because of this person they call Santa Claus," exclaimed the demon of envy. "He is simply ruining our business, and something must be done at once." So to this they readily agreed, but what to do was another more difficult matter to settle. They knew that Santa Claus worked all through the year at his castle in the Laughing Valley, preparing the gifts he was to distribute on Christmas Eve, and at first they resolved to try to tempt him into their caves, that they might lead him on a terrible pitfalls that ended in destruction. So the very next day, while Santa Claus was busily at work, surrounded by his little band of assistants, the demon of selfishness came to him and said, "These toys are wonderfully bright and pretty. Why do you not keep them for yourself? It is a pity to give them to those noisy boys and fretful girls who break and destroy them so quickly." "Nonsense!" cried the old graybeard, his bright eyes twinkling merrily as he turned toward the tempting demon. The boys and girls are never so noisy and fretful after receiving my presents, and if I can make them happy for one day in the year, I am quite content. So the demon went back to the others who awaited him in their caves and said, I have failed, for Santa Claus is not at all selfish. The following day, the demon of envy visited Santa Claus, and he said, the toy shops are full of playthings quite as pretty as those you are making. What a shame it is that they should interfere with your business. They make toys by machinery much quicker than you can make them by hand, and they sell them for money, while you get nothing for all your work. But Santa Claus refused to be envious of the toy shops. I can supply the little ones but once a year, on Christmas Eve, he answered. For the children are many, and I am but one, and as my work is one of love and kindness, I would be ashamed to receive money for my little gifts. But throughout the year, the children must be amused in some way, so the toy shops are able to bring much happiness to my little friends. I like the toy shops, and I am glad to see them prosper. In spite of the second rebuff, the demon of hatred thought he would try to influence Santa Claus, so the next day he entered the busy workshop and said, Good morning, Santa. I have bad news for you. Then run away like a good fellow, answered Santa Claus. Bad news is something I should be kept secret and never told. You cannot escape this, however, declared the demon, for in the world are many a good who do not believe in Santa Claus, and these are you are bound to hate bitterly since they have so wronged you. Stuff and rubbish, cried Santa. And there are others who resent your making children happy, and who sneer at you and call you a foolish old rattle rattlepat. You are quite right to hate such base slanders. You ought to be revenged upon them for their evil words. But I don't hate them, exclaimed Santa Claus positively. Such people do no real harm, but merely render themselves and their children unhappy. Poor things, I'd much rather help them any day than injure them. Indeed, the demons could not tempt old Santa Claus in any way. On the contrary, he was shrewd enough to see that their object in visiting him was to make mischief and trouble. And his cheery laughter disconcerted the evil ones and showed to them the folly of such an undertaking. So they abandoned honeyed words and determined to use force. It was well known that no harm can come to Santa Claus while he is in the Laughing Valley, for the fairies and the Ryls and the Knooks all protect him. But on Christmas Eve he drives his reindeer out into the big world, carrying a sleigh load of toys and pretty gifts to the children. And this was the time and the occasion when his enemies had the best chance to injure him. So the demons laid their plans and awaited the arrival of Christmas Eve. I'm just going to wait there so I can catch up. CBC, hope you're doing well. 1,000-person raid and wouldn't even know it, right? I was pretty into it. What's going on? Did Kitty O Game ever pop in? I didn't see Kitty O or Daddy O pop in. What's up, Baby Ice? So you're on a perfect way to fall asleep. Story time. Love you, kid. Wish you positive vibe. I'm good for it. I appreciate you, D. I appreciate y'all so much for being here. Still got 24 people in here. That is true. I did have an ALB raid once when I was reading. Had 190 people in here for so many hours. I think we finished like 3/4 of a book that day. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you. Uh, Thank you, Lori. Marble, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. We are about to The demons of the world are about to kidnap Santa Claus, so. Hmm? The moon shone big and white in the sky, and the snow lay crisp and sparkling on the ground as Santa Claus cracked his whip and sped way out of the valley into the great world beyond. The roomy sleigh was packed full with huge sacks of toys, and as the reindeer dashed onward, our jolly old Santa laughed and whistled and sang for very joy. For in all his merry life, this was the one day in the year when he was the happiest, the day he lovingly bestowed the treasures of his workshop upon the little children. It would be a busy night for him, he well knew, as he whistled and shouted and cracked his whip again. He reviewed in his mind all the towns and cities and farmhouses where he was expected and figured that he had just enough presents to go around and make every child happy. The reindeer knew exactly what was expected of them and dashed along so swiftly that their feet scarcely seemed to touch the snow-covered ground. Suddenly, a strange thing happened. A rope shot through the moonlight, and a big noose that was at the end of it settled over the arms and body of Santa Claus and drew tight. Before he could resist or even cry out, he was jerked from the seat of his sleigh and tumbled head foremost into the snowbank, while the reindeer rushed onward with the load of toys and carried it quickly out of sight and sound. Such a surprising experience confused old Santa for a moment. And when he had collected his senses, he found that the wicked demons had pulled him from the snowdrift and bound him tightly with many coils of the stout rope. And they carried the kidnapped Santa Claus away to their mountain, where they thrust the prisoner into the secret cave and chained him to the rocky wall so that he could not escape. Ha ha ha! Laughed the demons, rubbing their hands together with cruel glee. What will the children do now? How will they cry and scold? How they will cry and scold and storm when they find there are no toys in their stockings and no gifts on their Christmas trees. And what a lot of punishment they will receive from their parents, and how they will flock to our caves of selfishness and envy and hatred and malice. We have done a mighty clever thing, we demons of the caves. Now it so chanced that on this Christmas Eve the good Santa Claus had taken with him in his sleigh Nutter the Owl, Peter the Knook, Kilter the Pixie, and a small fairy named Whisk, his 4 favorite assistants. These little people he had often found very useful in helping him to distribute his gifts to the children, and when their master was so suddenly dragged from the sleigh, they were all snugly tucked underneath the seat, where the sharp wind could not reach them. The tiny immortals knew nothing of the capture of Santa Claus until some time after he had disappeared. But finally they missed his cheery voice, and as their master always sang or whistled on his journeys, the silence warned them that something was wrong. Little Whisk stuck his head out from underneath the seat and found Santa Claus gone and no one to direct the flight of the reindeer. "Whoa!" he called out to the deer, obediently slackened speed and came to a halt. Peter and Nutter and Kilter all jumped upon the seat and looked back over the track made by the sleigh. But Santa Claus had been left miles and miles behind. "What should we do?" asked Whisk anxiously, all the mirth and mischief abandoned from his wee face by the great calamity. "We must go back at once and find our master," said Nutter the Owl, who thought and spoke with much deliberation. "No, no!" exclaimed Peter the Knook, who, cross and crabbed though he was, might always be dependent upon an emergency. "If we delay or go back, there will not be time to get the toys to the children before morning, and that would grieve Santa Claus more than anything else." "It is certain that some wicked creatures have captured him," added Kilter thoughtfully, "and their object must be to make the children unhappy. So our first duty is to get the toys distributed as carefully as if Santa Claus were himself present. Afterward, we can search for our master and easily secure his freedom." This seemed such a good, sensible advice that the others at once resolved to adopt it. So Peter the Knook called to the reindeer, and the faithful animals again sprang forward and dashed over the hills and valleys, through the forest and plain, until they came to the houses wherein children lay sleeping and dreaming of the pretty gifts they would find on Christmas morning. We'll stop there. Yo, EDF, what's going on, brother? It's good to see you. Just making sure I didn't miss anybody. These are good little chapter spots. All right, all right. The little immortals had set themselves a difficult task, for although they had assisted Santa Claus on many of his journeys, their master had always directed and guided them and told them exactly what he wished them to do. But now they had to distribute the toys according to their own judgment, and they did not understand children as well as old Santa, so it was no wonder they made some laughable errors. Mamie Brown, who wanted a doll, got a drum instead, and a drum as is of no use to a girl who loves dolls. And Charlie Smith, who delights to romp and play out of doors, and who wanted some new rubber boots to keep his feet dry, received a sewing box filled with colored worsteds and threads and needles, which made him so provoked that he thoughtlessly called our dear Santa Claus a fraud. Had there been many such mistakes, that demons would have accomplished their evil purposes and made the children unhappy. But the little friends of the absent Santa Claus labored faithfully and intelligently to carry out their master's ideas, and they made fewer errors than might be expected under such unusual circumstances. And although they worked as swiftly as possible, day had begun to break before the toys and other presents were all distributed. So, for the first time in many years, the reindeer trotted into the Laughing Valley, on their return, in broad daylight, with the brilliant sun peeping over the edge of the forest to prove they were far behind their accustomed hours. Having put the deer in the stable, the little folk began to wonder how they might rescue their master, and they realized they must discover first of all what had happened to him and where he was. So Whisk the fairy transported himself to the bower of the Fairy Queen, which was located deep in the heart of the forest of Burzee, and once there, it did not take him long to find out all about the naughty demons and how they had kidnapped the good Santa Claus to prevent his making children happy. The Fairy Queen also promised her assistance, and then, fortified by this powerful support, Whisk flew back to where Nutter and Peter and Kilter awaited him, and the four counseled together and laid plans to rescue their master from his enemies. It is possible that Santa Claus was not as merry as usual during the night that succeeded his capture, for although he had faith in the judgment of his little friends, he could not avoid a certain amount of worry, and an anxious look would creep at times into his kind old eyes, as he thought of the disappointment that might await his dear little children, and the demons who guarded him by turns, one after another, did not neglect to taunt him with contemptuous words in his helpless condition. When Christmas Day dawned, the demon of malice was guarding the prisoner, and his tongue was sharper than that of any of the others. "The children are waking up, Santa," he cried. "They are waking up to find their stockings empty. Ho, ho! How they will quarrel and wail and stamp their feet in anger. Our caves will be full today, old Santa. Our caves are sure to be full." But to this, as to other like taunts, Santa Claus answered nothing. He was much grieved by his capture, it is true, but his courage did not forsake him, and finding that the prisoner would not reply to his jeers, the demon of malice presently went away and sent the demon of repentance to take his place. This last personage was not so disagreeable as the others. He had gentle and refined features, and his voice was soft and pleasant in tone. "My brother demons do not trust me overmuch," he said, as he entered the cavern. "But it is morning now, and the mischief is done. You cannot visit the children again for another year." "That is true," answered Santa Claus almost cheerfully. "Christmas Eve is past, and for the first time in centuries I have not visited my children." "The little ones will be greatly disappointed," murmured the demon of repentance, almost regretfully. "But that cannot be helped now. Their grief is likely to make the children selfish and envious and hateful, and if they come up to the caves of the demons today, I shall get a chance to lead some of them to the cave of repentance." "Did you never repent yourself?" asked Santa Claus curiously. "Oh, yes, indeed," answered the demon. "I am even now repenting that I assisted in your capture. Of course, it is too late to remedy the evil that has been done, but repentance, can come only after an evil thought or deed, for in the beginning there is nothing to repent of." "So I understand," said Santa Claus. "Those who avoid evil need never visit your cave." As a rule, that is true, replied the demon. Yet you, who have done no evil, are about to visit my cave at once. For to prove that I sincerely regret my share in your capture, I am going to permit you to escape. The speech greatly surprised the prisoner until he reflected that it was just what might be expected of the demon of repentance. The fellow at once busied himself untying the knots that bound Santa Claus and unlocking the chains that fastened him to the wall. Then he led way through the long tunnel until they both emerged to the cave of repentance. I hope you will forgive me, said the demon pledgingly. I am not really a bad person, you know, and I believe I accomplish a great deal of good in the world. With this, he opened a back door that led in a flood of sunshine, and Santa Claus sniffed the fresh air gratefully. I bear no malice, said he to the demon in a gentle voice, and I am sure the world would be a dreary place without you. So good morning, and a Merry Christmas to you. With these words, he stepped out to greet the bright morning, and a moment later he was trudging along, whistling softly to himself on his way home in the Laughing Valley. Marching over the snow towards the mountain was a vast army made up of the most curious creatures imaginable. There were numberless nooks from the forest, as rough and crooked in appearance as the gnarled branches of a tree they ministered to. And there were dainty rowels from the fields, each one bearing an emblem of the flower or plant it guarded. Behind these were many ranks of pixies, gnomes, and nymphs, and in the rear 1,000 beautiful fairies floated along in gorgeous array. This wonderful army was led by Whisk, Peter, Nutter, and Kilter, who had assembled it to rescue Santa Claus from captivity and to punish the demons who had dared take him away from his beloved children. And although they looked so bright and peaceful, the little immortals were armed with powers that would be very terrible to those who had incurred their anger. Woe to the demons of the caves if this mighty army of vengeance ever met them. But lo, coming to meet this loyal friends, appeared an imposing form of Santa Claus, his white beard floating in the breeze and his bright eyes sparkling with pleasure at this proof of the love and veneration he had inspired in the hearts of the most powerful creatures in existence. And while they clustered around him and danced with glee at his safe return, he gave them earnest thanks for their support, but Whisk and Nutter and Peter and Kilter he embraced affectionately. It is useless to pursue the demons, said Santa Claus to the army. They have their place in the world and can never be destroyed. But that is a great pity, nevertheless, he continued musingly. So the fairies and nooks and pixies and rowels all escorted the good man to his castle, and there left him to talk over the events of the night with his little assistants. Whisk had already rendered himself invisible and flown through the big world to see how the children were getting along on this bright Christmas morning. And by the time he returned, Peter had finished telling Santa Claus of how they had distributed the toys. We really did very well, cried the fairy in a pleased voice, for I found little unhappiness among the children this morning. Still, you must not get captured again, my dear master, for we might not be so fortunate another time in carrying out your ideas. He then related the mistakes that had been made, and which he had not discovered until his tour of inspection, and Santa Claus at once sent with him rubber boots for Charlie Smith and a doll for Mamie Brown, so that even those two disappointed ones became happy. As for the wicked demons of the cave, they were filled with anger and chagrin when they found out their clever capture of Santa Claus had come to naught. Indeed, no one that Christmas Day appeared to be at all selfish, or envious or hateful. And realizing that while the children's saint had so many powerful friends, it was folly to oppose him, and demons never again attempted to interfere with his journeys on Christmas Eve. Boom. End of book. Mishans, what's going on? I hope you're doing well. It's good to see you, fam. Audiobook voice Emma? That really depends on what they pay. Morning, evening, everyone. I hope you slept well, Mishans. I appreciate that, CBC. Likewise, excellent. We were just reading about a little story after we read the entire life and adventures of Santa Claus. There was a side story where he got captured by the demons of the world, like selfishness and envy and malice. But the demon of repentance was there as well. Yo, V, what's going on? It's good to see you. We're going to get into more, just about an hour over. So we're going to get into some classic stories by the Brothers Grimm that inspired many, many Christmas tales. And we're going to start with the elves and the shoemaker. Just out of friends. Excellent. Let's go. I'm going to get some more coffee real quick. And then we will get into the elves and the shoemaker. Which I think I've seen more done in cartoon form than I've seen in any other medium. The little elves sneaking in at night and making the shoes. I appreciate you all being here to relax and read with us. I don't even know where you would go to apply for audiobook narration. I think that's something you have to be discovered or already a celebrity. All right. Cup number 2, made and ready. All right, and this is also another very interesting first for me because I have not yet, or it's been a long time since I've read the Brothers Grimm. Mocha. I'm drinking caramel macchiato. It's hard. I would say, I mean, I'll drink coffee black, but if I have it my way, it's going to be a bunch of sugar and then some cream for color. Eggnog. We were just talking about eggnog earlier. That's understandable. I sometimes drink decaf coffee before bed because I like coffee, but sleep is important. All right. So we're going to get into our next story, which is The Elves and the Shoemaker, retold by Jacob Ludwig Karl Grimm and Wilhelm Karl Grimm, the Brothers Grimm, based upon an oral retelling by Gretchen Weil, translated by Edgar Taylor, illustrated by George Cruikshank. What's eggnog? It's eggy. It's noggy. It's good. Yeah, of course, Missions. No worries at all. Lurking is permitted. Eggnog. You know, I never really asked how to make it. I just always drank it. Yes, it is known to be alcoholic sometimes, but there's non-alcoholic eggnog. All right, here we go. Elves and the Shoemaker. There once was a shoemaker who worked very hard and was very honest. But still he could not earn enough to live upon, and at last all he had in the world was gone, except just leather enough to make one pair of shoes. Then he cut them all ready to make up the next day, meaning to get up early in the morning to work. His conscience was clear and his heart light amidst all his troubles. So he went peacefully to bed, left all his cares to heaven, and fell asleep. In the morning, after he had said his prayers, he set himself down to his work, when, to his great wonder, there stood the shoes, all ready made, upon the table. The good man knew not what to say or think of the strange event. He looked at the workmanship. There was not one false stitch in the whole job, and all was so neat and true that it was complete masterpiece. The same day a customer came in, and the shoes pleased him so well that he willingly paid a price higher than usual for them. And the poor shoemaker, with the money, bought leather enough to make 2 pairs more. In the evening he cut out the work and went to bed. Early that uh, went to bed early that he might get up and begin betimes the next day. But he was saved all the trouble, for when he got up in the morning, the work was finished, ready to his hand. Presently in came buyers, who paid him handsomely for his goods, so that he bought leather enough to make 4 pairs more. He cut out the work again overnight and found it finished in the morning as before, and so it went on for some time. What was got ready in the evening was always done by daybreak, and the good man soon became thriving and prosperous again. One evening, about Christmas time, as he and his wife were sitting over the fire chatting together, he said to her, "I should like to sit up and watch tonight, that we may see who it is that comes and does my work for me." The wife liked the thought, so they left a light burning and hid themselves in the corner of the room behind a curtain that was hung up there, and watched what should happen. As soon as it was midnight, there came 2 little naked dwarfs, and they sat themselves upon the shoemaker's bench, took up all the work that was cut out, and began to ply with their little fingers, stitching and rapping and tapping away at such a rate that the shoemaker was in all amazement, and could not take his eyes off for a moment. And on they went till the job was quite finished, and the shoes stood ready for use upon the table. This was long before daybreak, and then they bustled away, as quick as lightning. The next day the wife said to the shoemaker, "These little wights have made us rich, and we ought to be thankful to them and do them a good office in return. I am quite vexed to see them run about as they do. They have nothing upon their backs to keep off the cold. I'll tell you what, I'll make each of them a shirt, and a coat, and a waistcoat, and a pair of pantaloons into the bargain. Do you make each of them a little pair of shoes?" The thought pleased the good shoemaker very much, and one evening, when all things were ready, they laid them on the table instead of the work that they used to cut out. And then they went and hid themselves to watch what the little elves would do. About midnight they came in and were going to sit down to their work as usual, but when they saw the clothes laying for them, they laughed and were greatly delighted. Then they dressed themselves in the twinkling of an eye, and danced and capered and sprang about as merry as could be, till at last they danced out the door over the green, and the shoemaker saw them no more. But everything went well with him from that time forward, as long as he lived. That was a cute little story. All right, gotta go play with my friends. Just wanted to say hi real quick and see how y'all were doing. But yeah, bye. Have a great night. You as well, V. Have a great night. Right. That's funny. That makes sense too. Yeah, it's a seasonal drink for sure. It kind of tastes like vanilla to me, like vanilla pudding almost. Well, we have it because our Christmas time is the summertime here. No need for eggnog. That makes sense. Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into another tale, and this is quite classic, but it's called Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clark Moore, or Harry Beacom Livington Jr. Now more commonly known as A Visit from St. Nicholas, The Night Before Christmas, or 'Twas the Night Before Christmas Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas, was published anonymously in the upstate New York newspaper, the Troy Sentinel, on Tuesday, December 23rd, 1823. The identity of its author has since become a source of controversy, said to have been sent to the newspaper by a friend of a scholar and writer, Clement Clark Moore. The poem was frequently reprinted with no author credited. It was not until 1837 that it was first attributed to Moore in the New York Book of Poetry, edited by the author, poet, editor, a friend of Clement Clarke Moore, Charles Fenno Hoffman. Allegedly, to protect his scholarly reputation, Moore refused to publicly confirm or deny his authorship of the poem until, at the instance of his children, he included it in Poems, an 1844 anthology of his work. Wow, this really goes into all of it, huh? And goes into the Troy Sentinel article. That's pretty cool. But we are going to read an account of a visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With the little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, Cupid on, Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they met with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed in all fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ash and soot. A bundle of toys was flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opened his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly, it shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I'd laugh when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like a down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Hey, Maddie. Hope you're doing well. 37 likes, no shot. Let's go. That's incredible for the reading stream. Just an hour and a half. Reading some Christmas classics by the Brothers Grimm. And now we have one by Hans Christian Andersen, which is actually a fun fact because we all know the movie Frozen, Disney's movie Frozen. It's actually based on a Hans Christian Andersen story called The Ice Queen or The Snow Queen. Either way, we might get to it. We might get to read it. But what I thought was funny is as I'm watching it, I kind of picked up on something. And as you're watching Frozen, you'll realize that four of the main characters are Hans, Kristoff, Anna, and Sven. Hans Christian Andersen. And it's just a nice little tribute to the original author of the story. Air boot. I hope you're doing well, Maddie. I hope you're doing well. Yep, that is true. That is true. Sean Bowden. But I'm not really sure what this one is about. It's called The Fir Tree. I'm sure it's a well-known story, and yet I do never remember reading it. So I think we're going to read it together. What's up, Stafford? I hope you're doing well tonight, brother. Got 19 people in here listening to the Relax and Read Holiday Edition, Episode 3. I'm in pain. I'm sorry, Maddie. I hope we can help you relax and rest a little bit. Make sure you stay off of it. Make sure you're eating. Yeah, they probably had to. All right. The Fir Tree by Hans Christian Andersen. Far down in the forest, where the warm sun and the fresh air made a sweet resting place, grew a pretty little fir tree, and yet it was not happy. It wished so much to be tall like its companions, the pines and firs which grew around it. The sun shone, and the soft air flustered its leaves, and the little peasant children passed by, prattling merrily, but the fir tree heeded them not. Sometimes the children would bring a large basket of raspberries or strawberries, wreathed on a straw, and seat themselves near the fir tree and say, "Is it not a pretty little tree?" which made it feel more unhappy than before. And yet all this while the tree grew a notch or joint taller every year. For by the number of joints in the stem of a fir tree, we can discover its age. Still, as it grew, it complained, "Oh, how I wish I were as tall as the other trees, then I would spread out my branches on every side, and my top would overlook the wide world. I should have the birds building their nests on my boughs, and when the wind blew, I should bow with a stately dignity like my tall companions." The tree was so discontented that it took no pleasure in the warm sunshine, the birds, or the rosy clouds that floated over it morning and evening. Sometimes, in winter, when the snow lay white and glittering on the ground, a hare would come springing along and jump right over the little tree. And then how mortified it would feel. 2 winters passed, and when the third arrived, the tree had grown so tall that the hare was obliged to run around it. Yet it remained unsatisfied and would exclaim, "Oh, if I could just keep on growing tall and old, there is nothing else worth caring for in the world." In the autumn, as usual, the woodcutters came and cut down several of the tallest trees, and the young fir tree, which was now grown into its full height, shuddered as the noble trees fell to the earth with a crash. After the branches were lopped off, the trunks looked so slender and bare that they could scarcely be recognized. Then they were placed upon wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. Where were they going? What would become of them? The young fir tree wished very much to know. So in the spring, when the swallows and the storks came, it asked, "Do you know where those trees were taken? Did you meet them?" The swallows knew nothing, but the stork, after a little reflection, nodded his head and said, "Yes, I think I do. I met several new ships when I flew from Egypt, and they had a fine mast that smelt like fir. I think these must have been your trees. I assure you they were stately, very stately." "Oh, I wish I were tall enough to go on the sea," said the fir tree. "What is the sea, and what does it look like?" It would take too much time to explain," said the stork, flying quickly away. "Rejoice in thy youth," said the sunbeam. "Rejoice in thy fresh growth, and the young life that is in thee. Excuse me." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew watered it with its tears, but the fir tree regarded them not. Christmas time drew near, and many young trees were cut down, some even smaller and younger than the fir tree, who enjoyed neither rest nor peace with longing to leave its forest home. These young trees, which were chosen for their beauty, kept their branches and were also laid on wagons and drawn by horses out of the forest. "Where are they going?" asked the fir tree. "They are not taller than I am. Indeed, one is much less. And why are the branches not cut off? Where are they going?" We know," sang the sparrows. "We have looked in at the windows of houses in town, and we know what is done with them. They are dressed up in the most splendid manner. We have seen them standing in the middle of a warm room and adorned in all sorts of beautiful things, honey cakes, gilded apples, playthings, and many hundreds of wax tapers." "And then," asked the fir tree, trembling through all its branches, "and then what happens?" "We did not see any more," said the sparrows, "but this was enough for us." "I wonder whether anything so brilliant will ever happen to me," thought the fir tree. "It would be much better than crossing the sea. I long for it almost with pain. Oh, when will Christmas be here? I am now as tall and as well grown as those which were taken away last year. Oh, and I now lay oh, that I were now laid on the wagon or standing in the warm room, with all the brightness and splendor around me. Something better and more beautiful is to come after, or the trees would not be so decked out. Yes, what follows will be grander and more splendid. What can it be? I am weary with longing. I scarcely know how I feel." "Rejoice with us," said the air and the sunlight. "Enjoy thine own bright life in the fresh air." But the tree would not rejoice, though it grew taller every day in winter and summer. Its dark green foliage might be seen in the forest, while passers would say, "What a beautiful tree!" A short time before Christmas, the discontented fir tree was the first to fall. As the axe cut through the stem and divided the pitch, the tree fell with a groan to the earth, conscious of pain and faintness, and forgetting all of its anticipations of happiness. In sorrow at leaving its home in the forest, it knew that it should never see its dear old companions, the trees, nor the little bushes and many colored flowers that had grown by its side, perhaps not even the birds. Neither was the journey at all pleasant. The tree first recovered itself while being unpacked in the courtyard of a house with several other trees, and it heard a man say, "We only want one, and this one is the prettiest." Then came two servants in grand livery, and carried the fir tree into a large and beautiful apartment. On the walls hung pictures, and near the great stove stood a great china vase with lions on the lids. There were rocking chairs, silken sofas, large tables covered with pictures, books, and playthings, worth a great deal of money. At least the children said so. Then the fir tree was placed in a large tub full of sand, but green baize hung all around it, so that no one could see it was in a tub. And it stood on a very handsome carpet. How the fir tree trembled! What was going to happen to him now? Some young ladies came, and the servants helped them to adorn the tree. On one branch they hung little bags cut out of colored paper, and each bag was filled with sweetmeats. From other branches hung gilded apples and walnuts, as if they had grown there. And above and all around were hundreds of red and blue and white tapers, which were fastened on the branches. Dolls, exactly like real babies, were placed under the green leaves, and the tree had never seen such things before. And at the very top was fastened a glittering star made of tinsel. Oh, it was very beautiful. "This evening," they all exclaimed, "how bright it will be! Oh, that the evening were come," thought the tree. "And the tapers lighted, then I shall know what else is going to happen. Will the trees of the forest come to see me? I wonder if the sparrows will peep in at the windows as they fly. Shall I grow faster here, and keep on all these ornaments, summer or winter?" But guessing was of very little use. It made his bark ache, and this pain is as bad for a slender fir tree as a headache is for us. At last the tapers were lighted, and then what glistened a glistening blaze of light the tree presented. It trembled so with joy in all its branches that one of the candles fell among the green leaves and burnt some of them. "Help! Help!" exclaimed the young ladies, but there was no danger, for they quickly extinguished the fire. After this the tree tried not to tremble at all. Though the fire frightened him, he was so anxious not to hurt any of the beautiful ornaments, even while their brilliancy dazzled him. And now the folding doors were thrown open, and a troop of children rushed in as if they intended to upset the tree. They were followed more silently by their elders. For a moment, the little ones stood silent with astonishment, and then they shouted for joy, till the room rang, and they danced merrily around the tree, while one present after another was taken from it. What are they doing? What will happen next? Thought the fir. At last the candles burnt down to the branches and were put out. Then the children received permission to plunder the tree. Oh, how they rushed upon it, till the branches cracked, and had it not been fastened with the glistening star to the ceiling, it might have been thrown down. The children then danced about with their pretty toys, and no one noticed the tree except the children's maid, who came in to peep among the branches to see if an apple or a fig had been forgotten. A story! A story! Cried the children, pulling a little fat man towards the tree. Now we shall be in the green shade, said the man, as he seated himself under it, and the tree will have the pleasure of hearing also. But I shall only relate one story. What shall it be? Invidiavity, or Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs but soon got up again, and at last married a princess? Evindi, Evidi Avidi, cried some. Humpty Dumpty, cried others. And there was a fine shouting and crying out, but the fir tree remained quite still, and thought to himself, shall I have anything to do with all this? But he had already amused them as much as they wished. Then the old man told them the story of Humpty Dumpty, how he fell downstairs and was raised up again and married a princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried, tell another, for they wanted to hear the story of Ivedy Avedy. But they only had Humpty Dumpty. After this, the fir tree became quite silent and thoughtful. Never had the birds in the forest told such tales as Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs and yet married a princess. Ah, yes, so it happens in the world, thought the fir tree. He believed it all, because it was by such a nice man. Ah, well, he thought, who knows? Perhaps I may fall down too and marry a princess. And he looked forward joyfully to the next evening, expecting to be again decked out with lights and playthings, gold and fruit. Tomorrow I will not tremble, he thought. I will enjoy all my splendor, and I shall hear the story of Humpty Dumpty again, and perhaps Ivedy Avedy. And the tree remained quiet and thoughtful all night. In the morning, the servants of the housemaid came in. Now, thought the fir, all my splendor is going to begin again. But they dragged him out of the room, and upstairs to the garret, and threw him on the floor in a dark corner where no daylight shone. And there they left him. What does this mean? Thought the tree. What am I to do here? I can hear nothing in a place like this. And he had enough time to think, for days and nights passed and no one came near him. And when at last somebody did, it was only to put away a large box in the corner. So the tree was completely hidden from sight, as if it had never existed. It is winter now, thought the tree. The ground is hard and covered with snow, so that people cannot plant me. I shall be sheltered here, I dare say, until spring comes. How thoughtful and kind everybody is to me. Still, I wish this place were not so dark as well as lonely, with not even a little hare to look at. How pleasant it was out in the forest while the snow lay on the ground, when the hare would run by, yes, and jump over me too, although I did not like it then. Oh, it is terribly lonely here. Squeak, squeak, said a little mouse, creeping cautiously towards the tree. Then came another, and they both sniffed at the fir tree and crept between the branches. Oh, it is very cold, said the little mouse, or else we should be comfortable here, shouldn't we, you old fir tree? I am not old, said the fir tree. There are many who are older than I am. Where do you come from? And what do you know? Asked the mice, who were full of curiosity. Have you seen the most beautiful places in all the world, and can you tell us all about them? And have you been in the storeroom, where cheeses lie on the shelf and hams hang from the ceiling? One can run about on tallow candles there and go in thin and come out fat. I know nothing of that place, said the fir tree, but I know the wood where the sun shines and the birds sing. And then the tree told the little mice all about his youth, They had never heard such an account in their lives, and after that they listened to it attentively. They said, "What a number of things you have seen! You must have been very happy." "Happy!" exclaimed the fir tree, and then as he reflected upon what he has been telling them, he said, "Ah, yes, after all, those were happy days." But when he went on and related all about the Christmas Eve and how he had been dressed up with cakes and lights, the mice said, "How happy you must have been, you old fir tree." "I am not old at all," replied the tree. "I only come from the forest this winter. I am now checked in my growth." "What splendid stories you can relate," said the little mice, and the next night 4 other mice came with them to hear what the tree had to tell. The more he talked, the more he remembered, and then he thought to himself, "Those were happy days, but they may come again. Humpty Dumpty fell downstairs, and yet he married a princess. Perhaps I may marry a princess too." And the fir tree thought of the pretty little birch tree that grew in the forest, which was to him a real beautiful princess. "Who is Humpty Dumpty?" asked the little mice. And then the tree related the whole story. He could remember every single word, and the little mice were so delighted with it that they were ready to jump to the top of the tree. The next night, a great many more mice made their appearance, and on Sunday 2 rats came with them. But they said it was not a pretty story at all, and the little mice were very sorry, for it made them also think less of it. "Do you know only one story?" asked the rats. "Only one," replied the fir tree. "I heard it on the happiest evening of my life, but I did not know it was so happy at the time." "We think it is a very miserable story," said the rats. "Don't you know any story about bacon or tallow in the storeroom?" "No," replied the tree. "Many thanks to you, then," replied the rats, and they marched off. The little mice also kept away after this, and the tree sighed and said, "It was very pleasant when the merry little mice sat around me and listened while I talked. Now that is all past too. However, I shall consider myself happy when one comes to take me out of this place." But would this ever happen? Yes. One morning people came to clear out the garret. The boxes were packed away, and the tree was pulled out of the corner and thrown roughly on the garret floor. Then the servant dragged it out upon the staircase where the daylight shone. "Now life is beginning again," said the tree, rejoicing in the sunshine and fresh air. Then it was carried downstairs and taken to the courtyard so quickly that it forgot to think of itself and could only look about. There was so much to be seen. The court was close to the garden, where everything looked blooming. Fresh and fragrant roses hung over little palings. The linden trees were in blossom, while the swallows flew here and there, crying, "Twit, twit, twit, my mate is coming." But it was not the fir tree they meant. "Now I shall live," cried the tree, joyfully spreading out its branches. But alas! They were all withered and yellow, and it lay in the corner among the weeds and the nettles. The star of gold paper still stuck in the top of the tree and glittered in the sunshine. In the same courtyard, 2 of the merry children were playing who had danced around the tree at Christmas and had been so happy. The youngest saw the gilded star and ran and pulled it off the tree. "Look what is sticking to the old ugly fir tree," said the child, treading on the branches till they cracked under his boot. And the tree saw all the fresh, bright flowers in the garden, and then looked at itself and wished it had remained in the dark corner of the garret. It thought of its fresh youth in the forest, of the merry Christmas evening, and of the little mice who had listened to the story of Humpty Dumpty. "Past, past," said the old tree. "Oh, had I but enjoyed myself while I could have done so! But now it is too late." Then a lad came and chopped the tree into small pieces, till a large bundle lay in a heap on the ground. The pieces were placed in the fire under the copper, and they quickly blazed up brightly, while the tree sighed so deeply that each sigh was like a pistol shot. Then the children, who were at play, came and seated themselves in front of the fire, and looked at it, and cried, "Pop, pop!" But each pop, which was a deep sigh, the tree was thinking of a summer day in the forest, and of the Christmas evening, and of Humpty Dumpty, the only story it had ever heard or knew how to relate, till at last it was consumed. The boys still played in the garden. The youngest wore the golden star on his breast, with which the tree had been adorned during the happiest evening of its existence. Now All was past. The tree's life was past, and the story also. For all stories must come to an end at last. Well, that was dark. Clayton tells me I should post my recipes and dinners. I laughed at him. Don't laugh. I think that would be cool to see. 38 likes. Let's go. Yeah, that was an interesting story, and it has a very good moral as well, to enjoy the time while it's here. All right. Let me see here. Does this have... Yes, it does. Fir tree, German Christmas tree, fetching home the Christmas dinners. There was one that caught my eye. There's one called The Dear Little Ghost. We might look into that one, but this one was about a tin soldier. Could read The Gift of the Magi. That's a pretty good one. Did I miss it? Tree in the Workhouse, Christmas Day, Babushka. Christmas Dream, Christmas at Sea, Old Father Christmas, Adventures of the Blue Carbuncle. Kidnapped Santa Claus, we just read. We might do The Gift of the Magi, if I can't find the Tin Men. I'm kind of disappointed. I thought the Tin Woodman story was in here. Alright, let's do The Gift of the Magi. By O. Henry. 16, 15 of y'all still in here. Appreciate you guys. Marquette, how's it going? It's good to see you. We're just doing some holiday reading, and really thought the Tin Soldier story was in here. But we're going to read The Gift of the Magi, which is a very old story, and it was told many, many different times. It may sound familiar. Of course, all of these stories I've seen done by Disney in one form or another. Just did about 2 hours, so we'll probably do this and one other. And yeah, really appreciate you guys joining me. Thank you for believing in ghosts and having a beautiful Monday night. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch of the howl, so Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it was certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendiancy squad. In the vestibule below was a letterbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. So, appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young, The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during the former period of prosperity, when its processor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, though, they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D, but whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with a powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at the gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit nearer to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There is a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtained in fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs, in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch. That had been his father's and grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hung out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed upon the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with a brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Monsofri, hair, goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked like a Sofferini. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass of the practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the husband metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it at any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by meticulous ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worth the watch. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of the chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave away a little to prejudice and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love. Which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. With 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, loose-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? What could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled on the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair way down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit for saying little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please God, made him think I'm still pretty." The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow. He was only 22. And to be burdened with a family, he needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter with the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any kind of sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly, with that particular expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived throughout Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even for the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said, with an air almost of idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy, be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He unfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week, or $1 million a year, what's the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it on the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said. "About me, I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you'll see why you had me going for a while at first." White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper. And then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating an immediate employment of all comforting powers of the lord of the flat. For there lay the combs, a set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure turquoise shell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession, and now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," he said, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice for us to use at just present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs, and now I suppose you put the chops on?" The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing a privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who almost unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasure in their house. But in the last word of the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Oh, all who give and receive gifts such as these are the wisest. Everywhere they are the wisest. They are the Magi. No worries at all. Appreciate you, Mrs. 5150. Love that rule. Chinese food sounds so good right now. Excellent. And that is the gift of the Magi. One of my favorite stories, because she wanted those combs for her hair, which she sold to buy the watch band, but he sold the watch to buy the combs. And it's just super sweet. That's what Christmas should be about. Father Christmas, Christmas at Sea, The Adventures. All right, well, we might read Dear, Dear Little Ghost, just because. And because I can't find the tin soldier, I might have to get that one for next time. All right. Let's read Dear, Dear Little Ghost. Let's see how long this is. Not too long. The Ambitious Snowflake, I love it. All right, we're getting into uncharted territory, y'all. I have no idea if these are old enough to be in public domain, but we're going to end with this one. It's called Their Dear Little Ghost. No idea what it's about. Their Dear Little Ghost by Elia W. Patate. Pitai. The first time one looked at Elizabeth, one was not prepossessed. She was thin and brown, her nose turned slightly upward, her toes went in just a perceptible degree, and her hair was perfectly straight. But when one looked longer, one perceived that she was a charming little creature. The straight hair was as fine as silk and hung in a funny little braids down her back. There was not a flaw in her soft brown skin, and her mouth was tender and shapely. But her particular charm lay in a look which she habitually had, of seeming to know curious things, such as it is not allotted to ordinary persons to know. One felt tempted to say to her, "What are those beautiful things which you know, and of which others are ignorant? What is it you see with those wise and pellucid eyes? Why is it that everybody loves you?" Elizabeth was my godchild, and I knew her better than any other child in the world. But still I could not truthfully say that I was familiar with her, for to me her spirit was like a fair and fragrant road in the midst of which I might walk in peace and joy, but where I was continually to discover something new. The last time I saw her quite well and strong was over in the woods, where she had gone with her two little brothers and her nurse to pass the hottest weeks of summer. I followed her, foolish old creature that I was, just to be near her, for I needed to dwell where the sweet aroma of her life could reach me. One morning, when I came from my room limping a little because I'm not so young as I used to be, and the lake wind works havoc with me. My little godchild came dancing to me singing, "Come with me and I'll show you my places, my places, my places." Miriam, when she chanted by the Red Sea, might have been more exultant, exultant, but she could not have been more bewitching. Of course, I knew what places were because I had once been a little girl myself, but unless you are acquainted with the real meaning of places, it would be useless to try to explain. Either you know places or you do not, just as you understand the meaning of poetry or you do not. There are things in the world which cannot be taught. Elizabeth's two tiny brothers were present, and I took one by each hand and followed her. No sooner had we got out of the doors in the woods than a sort of mystery fell upon the world and upon us. We were cautioned to move silently, and we did so, avoiding the crunching of dry twigs. "The fairies hate noise," whispered my little godchild, her eyes narrowing like a cat's. "I must get my wand first thing I do," she said in an odd undertone. "It is useless to try to do anything without a wand." The tiny boys were profoundly impressed, and indeed so was I. I felt that at last I should, if I behaved properly, see the fairies, which had hitherto avoided my materialistic gaze. It was an enchanting moment, for there appeared just then to be nothing commonplace about life. There was a swale near by, and into this the little girl plunged. I could see her red straw hat bobbing about among the tall rushes, and I wondered if there were snakes. "Do you think there are snakes?" I asked one of the tiny boys. "If there are," he said with conviction, "they won't dare hurt her." He convinced me. I feared no more. Presently Elizabeth came out of the swale. In her hand was a brown cat-tail, perfectly full and round. She carried it as queens carry their scepters, the beautiful queens we dream of in our youth. "Come," she commanded, and waved the scepter in a fine manner. So we followed, each tiny boy gripping my hand tight. We were all three a trifle awed. Elizabeth led us into the dark underbrush. The branches, as they flew back in our faces, left them wet with dew. A wee path, made by the girl's dear feet, guided our footsteps. Perfumes of elderberry and wild cucumber scented the air. A bird frightened from its nest made frantic cries above our heads. The underbrush thickened. Presently the gloom of the hemlocks was over us, and in the midst of the shadowy green a tulip tree flaunted its leaves. Waves boomed and broke upon the shore below. There was a growing dampness as we went on, treading very lightly. The little green snake ran coquettishly from us. A fat and glossy squirrel chattered at us from a safe height, stroking his whiskers with a complacent air. At length we reached the place. It was a circle of velvet grass, bright as the first blades of spring, delicate as fine sea ferns. The sunlight, falling down the shaft between the hemlocks, flooded it with a softened light and made the forest round about look like deep purple velvet. My little godchild stood in the midst and raised her wand impressively. "This is my place," she said, with a sort of wonderful gladness in her tone. "This is where I come to the fairy balls. Do you see them?" "See what?" whispered one tiny boy. "The fairies." There was a silence. The older boy pulled at my skirt. "Do you see them?" he asked, his voice trembling with expectancy. "Indeed," I said, "I fear I am too old and wicked to see fairies, and yet—" "Are their hats red?" "They are," laughed the little girl. "Their hats are red, and as small as small." She held up the pearly nail of her wee finger to give us the correct idea. "And their shoes are very pointed at the toes. Oh, very pointed. And their garments are green as grass. And they blow little horns, the sweetest little horns." "I think I see them," I cried. "I think we see them too," said the tiny boys, laughing in perfect glee. "And you hear their horns, don't you?" my little godchild asked somewhat anxiously. "Don't we hear their horns?" asked the tiny boys. "We think we hear their horns," they cried. "Do you think we do?" "It must be we do," I said. "Aren't we very, very happy?" We all laughed softly. Then we kissed each other, and Elizabeth let us out, her wand held high in the air. And so my feet found the lost path to Arcady. The next day, I was called to the Pacific coast. The duty kept me there till well into December. A few days before the date set for my return to my home, a letter came from Elizabeth's mother. "Our little girl is gone into the unknown," she wrote. That unknown in which she seemed to be forever trying to pry. We knew she was going, and we told her. She was quite brave, but she begged us to try some way to keep her till after Christmas. "My presents are not finished yet," she made a moan, "and I did so want you to see what I was going to have. You can't have a very happy Christmas without me, I should think. Can you arrange to keep me somehow until after then?" We could not arrange either with God in heaven nor science upon the earth, and she is gone. She was only my little godchild, and I am an old maid with no business fretting over children. But it seemed as if the medium of light and beauty had been taken from me. Through this crystal soul I had perceived whatever was loveliest. However, what was, was. I returned to my home and took up my course of Egyptian history, and determined to concern myself with nothing this side of the Ptolemies. Her mother has told me how, on Christmas Eve, as usual, she and Elizabeth's father filled the stockings of the little ones and hung them, where they had always hung, by the fireplace. They had little heart for the task, but they had been prodigal that year in their expenditures, and had heaped upon the two tiny boys all the treasures they thought would appeal to them. They asked themselves how they could have been so insane previously as to exercise economy at Christmas time, and what they meant by not getting Elizabeth the auto harp she had asked for the year before. "And now," began her father, thinking of harps, but he could not complete the sentence, of course, and the two went on passionately and almost angrily with their tasks. There were 2 stockings and 2 piles of toys, 2 stockings only, and only 2 piles of toys. 2 is very little. They went away and left the darkened room, and after a time they slept. After a long time. Perhaps that was about the time the tiny boys awoke, and, putting on their little dressing gowns and bed slippers, made a dash for the room where the Christmas things were always placed. The older one carried a candle which gave out a feeble light. The other followed behind them through the silent house. They were very impatient and eager, but when they reached the door of the sitting room they stopped, for they saw that another child was before them. It was a delicate little creature sitting in her white nightgown, with 2 rumply funny braids falling down her back, and she seemed to be weeping. As they watched, she arose, and putting out one slender finger as the child does when she counts, she made sure over and over again, 3 sad times, that there were only 2 stockings and 2 piles of toys. Only those, and no more. The little figure looked so familiar that the boy started towards it, but just then, putting up her arm and bowing her face in it, as Elizabeth had been used to do when she wept or was offended, the little thing glided away and went out. That's what the boy said. It went out as a candle goes out. They ran and woke their parents with the tale, and all the house was searched in a wonderment and disbelief and hope and tumult. But nothing was found. For nights they watched, but there was only the silent house. Only the empty rooms. They told the boys they must have been mistaken, but the boys shook their heads. "We know our Elizabeth," said they. "It was our Elizabeth crying 'cause she hadn't no stocking and no toys, and we would have given her all of ours, only she went out, just went out." Alec. The next Christmas I helped with the little festival. It was none of my affair, but I asked to help, and they let me. And when we were all through, there were 3 stockings and 3 piles of toys, and in the largest one was all the things that they could think of my dear child would love. I locked the boys' chamber that night, and I slept on the divan in the parlor off the sitting room. I slept but little, and the night was very still, so windless and white and still that I think I must have heard the slightest noise. Yet I heard none. Had I been in had I been in my grave, I think ears would not have remained more unsaluted. Yet when daylight came, I went to unlock the boy's bedchamber door. I saw that the stocking and all the treasures which I had brought for my little godchild were gone. There was not a vestige of them remaining. Of course, we told the boys nothing. As for me, after dinner I went home and buried myself once more in my history, and so interested was I that midnight came without my knowing it. I should not have looked up at all, I suppose, to become aware of the time, had it not been for a faint, sweet sound as of a child striking a stringed instrument. It was so delicate and remote that I hardly heard it, but so joyous and tender that I could not but listen. And when I heard it a second time, it seemed as if it caught an echo of the child's laugh. At first I was puzzled. Then I remembered the little auto harp I had placed among the other things in that pile of varnished toys. I said aloud, "Farewell, dear little ghost. Go rest. Rest in joy, dear little ghost. Farewell. Farewell." That was years ago, but there has been silence since. Elizabeth was always an obedient little thing. Well, that was sweet and creepy all at the same time. What do you guys think? Congrats on the radio. Well, I appreciate that if you're talking to me. 41 likes. Let's go. It's good to see you, Ancient Meal. It's good to see you. So, we are going to do what we always do at this point. I'm going to start a little poll. All right. And I'll let you all decide. Oh, Pupper. Pupper. Yeah. Go on. How are you? 40 likes, 15 peeps here. Excellent. Hope you've been enjoying them as well. That little ghost story, it was sweet. It was a little creepy, creeping a bit, but it was sweet. I did eat right before I got on, and I plan to eat a little more when I'm done. I appreciate you, Leighton. Thanks for looking out for me. But yes, I am good for one more. This one isn't too long. It's just the Ambitious Snowflake, a children's Christmas story is what it's called. And now I'm going to see exactly how long. Okay, yeah. That's not long at all. That's not long at all. 5 votes, and we are all for it. All right. We're just going to go ahead and end that after a minute and 5 votes. Seems the 5 listening. Yes, I am okay. That I promise you. And this won't take too long. The Ambitious Snowflake, a children's Christmas story by S. Seton Moore, illustrated by Hamilton King. There is a very beautiful land hidden from mortal eyes where thousands and thousands of snowflakes are born every year. If men and women had clearer sight, they would see that each little white atom contained a lovely wee sprite. These dainty fairies travel in large families, and, as is the case with human beings, many kinds of character make up the family party. "I am going to do very great things," said Niguette, an unusually large and beautiful snowflake. "And you must all come and help me do them," she said, waved her tiny crystal wand imperiously. "What are you going to do? Tell us, Niguette," cried the large family of brothers and sisters. "Well," said Niguette, as they sailed along, As they sailed along, there is a country ruled by the greatest queen that ever lived, and little Ermine told me all about her. His family do not like her because she dresses in nothing but tales of his friends. So he says, but I don't quite believe that. But I'm going to see it for myself. I intend to fall right into her hands. They say she holds the keys of the world, and I am going to end in the sight of all the millions of people over whom she rules. It will be seen that Niguet's ideas of things were not quite right, but the admiring family circle only uttered ohs of family admiration and wonder. They did nothing but talk about it among themselves as they blindly followed Niguet through the sharp, cold air. Niguet, too, was so occupied with her great thoughts about the stir she was to make in the big unknown world that she did not see where she was going and blundered right into the most curious trap, and all her family followed her. Of course, this was a very strange thing. It is not often a trap is set for snowflakes, but there was a cause, for a very urgent cause, for the setting of this one. King Magnificus and his queen Splendidosa had one son, who was most terribly spoiled, Prince Superbus. It was Prince Superbus had such a fiery disposition that uh, his life was despaired of unless he could be kept cool. So after many and long deliberations, the court physicians had most wisely decided to order snowflakes to be caught and kept all over the palace so that they might cool the air, and so correct the heat of the prince's temper. For this reason, unwary snowflakes were captured, frozen stiff by the court magicians, and placed in crystal boxes. This was very trying for the courtiers, who all caught tremendous colds, but the court physicians were kept busy all the year round trying to cure them. However, it became so unfashionable not to sneeze that everyone was soon resigned to this fate. And as his ladies found fur surprisingly becoming, they were very soon reconciled to the inevitable. Prince Superbus had been worse than ever on the day of Niguet's capture, so she and all her family were quickly shut up in the especial den, and the prince left in solitude. Finally, he began kicking at the crystal boxes, and that greatly upset Niguet's dignity, so she called out as loudly as she could, "Prince Superbus, what are you doing?" The prince stood as still as if he had suddenly been turned to stone. Then he peered about, but at first he could find no one. At length the idea struck him to look in the crystal boxes, and when he saw sprite after sprite sitting disconsolately with their prisons, he laughed outright. Niguet grew very angry indeed. "You may laugh," she cried indignantly, "but if you were a nice boy you would not behave in such ridiculous fashion, interfering with other people's lives in this way. Pray, why should we be shut up in a box just because you like to be so silly?" Prince Superbus gasped in astonishment. This was quite a new way of looking at his conduct. He knew quite well that his mother and father were secretly delighted at his wonderful high spirits, as they were pleased to call it. He was greatly offended. "I'll keep you in there forever," he said angrily. "You ought to be glad you can be useful to a prince." And he stormed out of the room altogether. Niguet wept, but she had sense enough to know now that she must make friends with the prince if she were ever to carry out her grand scheme of life. The next time Superbus came near her, she said she felt very dull, and meekly asked the prince to come and talk to her. The first day he refused, but presently he began to grow interested in his pretty little prisoner, and spent quite a long time talking with her. The court physicians congratulated themselves on the grand success of their treatment, and went about with their noses so high in the air that, one after another, they all had severe tumbles, though not being able to see where they were walking. Niguet soon discovered that the fiery prince was ambitious too, and so artful did she talk and talk that finally Superbus came to the conclusion that nothing would do, but he must see this wonderful queen who wore ermine tails, and to whom millions of people bowed themselves down all day and night. "Tell me, Niguet," he said, "tell me how I can come with you." I do not think you can, said the artful sprite, knowing that was just the way to make Superbus all the more determined. At last she said, "If you open wide the windows to let the cold air in and let us out of the boxes, we will change you into a snowflake too, and then you can come with us." Superbus actually believed every word she said, opened the windows, and broke into pieces the crystal boxes. Then, of course, all the snowflakes flew into the frosty air, and Niget cried, "Goodbye, Prince Superbus. I will tell the great queen you are coming." How Superbus stormed and raged and shook his fist at the retreating snowflakes. Finally, he threw cushions at the king and queen and all the physicians, and behaved so badly that, in self-defiance, the court magicians had to be called in to freeze him into quietness. The queen wept bitterly and the king sniffed secretly, but no one could find a better way out of the difficulty at present. So now Niget was free and the poor little prince a prisoner. The fairy family continued this long journey, and some of the flakes began to feel worn out and to express desire to settle down softly on some object or another. "I should like to stay here," murmured one flake, looking longingly at some tall pines bending under the weight of snow. "And I here," sighed another flake as they passed a snug little cottage with gleaming windows and a roof already white with its winter burden. But Niget sternly kept them all together. "We are getting near our journey's end, I feel sure," she said reassuringly. They were, in fact, nearing a great city. Instead of lonely fir trees and nestling cottages, there were rows and rows of gleaming lights and houses, and snow did not keep white very long, and the little sprites quite shuddered at its ugly color. But numbers of people were hurrying about in cheery fashion, heedless of the now fast-falling flakes. Mostly their hands were so full of queer-shaped parcels that they had not a free hand to hold an umbrella, or even give in friendly greeting. But they nodded to each other and smiled and said joyfully, "Merry Christmas, a Merry Christmas." There were a great many happy little children looking very excited about something or another. Then some bells began to ring, and people seemed to grow happier and happier. Even Niget began to feel a wide desire to tumble down among the happy crowd. However, she steeled her heart against any such mad ideas, and decided to look about for a great queen she had come to seek. The snow had ceased falling now, and the sky grew bright with stars, and Niget heard people murmur, "Seasonable weather this, just the right weather for Christmas time." Fires were replenished. Pretty maidens wrapped themselves up in cozy furs. Grandmothers told tales of cold winters they remembered, and grandfathers aided and abetted them. But at last all grew still, and the cold grew more and more intense. As all these sounds of joy and festivities died away into silence, Niget heard the sound of a sobbing, and saw a little child lying on the ground clasping a bunch of crimson berries. "I wanted to give 'em to the kind lady," he was sobbing. "She liked 'em so last year, and I be so cold I can't walk no more." And down the head dropped on the little chap's arm till he sobbed himself to sleep. "He'll die of cold," cried Niget, thinking of the poor wee bird she had seen one day with its bright eyes glazed and its poor feet stretched out stiff and straight. And straightway, forgetful of queen and glory, she sailed softly down and rested lightly on the little lonely figure, to try to keep him warm. Down fluttered all the flakes, and then more and more, till the child's figure was covered with soft white snow. "Where's the queen?" asked one snowflake. "I forgot all about her," murmured Niget as she quietly melted away. "Why, what is this?" said a quiet voice as a speaker tumbled over the little figure in the snow. Then it was not long before the sleeping burden was carried into light and warmth, and the poor wee laddie restored to life again. His childish story was soon told. The lady at whose gate he had fallen had last year visited him when sick, and she had worn crimson holly berries in her warm fur muff. The child's quick eye noted how she caressed them, but he did not know that it was for the sake of the giver. He had tried to show his gratitude by bringing her some this year, and had nearly fallen a victim to the cold. "Brave little man," cried the finder of this little wanderer, when he heard how far he had come. "He shall share our happiness," he cried, turning to the lady who shyly smiled assent, and that was the first of Ned's happy Christmases. First, he was prosaic little page, all buttons and importance. But though in after years he rose to positions of trust, he always kept a shriveled bunch of holly berries in memory of the Christmas night when his good fortune began. When Niget had sunk down, regardless of her fine plans, she, of course, had expected the fate of every snowflake to melt away into nothingness. Imagine her surprise then when she awoke again, feeling bigger and looking more lovely than ever, and by her side stood another white fairy holding out hands in greeting. Welcome, Niget, said the fairy. You are one of us now. But the others, they helped too? They only went because you did. They did not give up anything, for they care nothing about the great queen. Niget smiled. Neither did she now. How funny it seemed to her that she ever did. Come, said her fairy guide. You have one more test to perform. And the astonished Niget found herself before the palace of the King Magnificus. It cannot be a Merry Christmas with one's son frozen stiff. The queen was sobbing, and a bewitching little white maiden stood smiling on the threshold. I believe, ma'am, she said, I could help to keep the Prince Superbus very good-tempered indeed. At once the queen dragged her off to the court magicians, and in less time than it takes to tell, Prince Superbus was free once more. When he saw how very pretty Niget looked, he quite forgot she was the naughty little snow fairy who had cheated him so. If only the little maiden could stay and play with him. So that was a Merry Christmas at court. In fact, there never was a merrier until years and years later, when the boy and girl had grown up to be handsome youth and sweetest maiden. And then there was a wedding that Christmas, which put all weddings into the shade that have ever been held before or since. Before a glowing fire, a little boy was sitting enjoying the cheerful blaze, and a motherly-looking person was holding a streaming basin of something good. The snow fairy saved me, the little fellow was saying. A gentleman said so. Snow fairies, sniffed the comfortable-looking party. You drink this and see if it isn't much better than snow fairies. Such rubbish. Another sniffed. But the gentleman in the background laughed and nodded at the boy. I shouldn't wonder if the snow fairies know all about it, he said. Just then the bells began ringing merrily, swiftly, as if they could not tell their message quickly enough. Peace and goodwill, they pealed, and the kind lady bent to kiss the little wistful face and cried, A Merry Christmas, Ned. Well, that was sweet. Sweet little story. Family and friends are safe, healthy, healthy. It's what my Nana Katrina taught me. That is a very beautiful lesson indeed. And I super appreciate everybody joining me tonight for a nice little relaxing and read session. Got 41 likes on a Monday. Let's go. That's incredible, y'all. Y'all truly make these streams incredible for me. It gives me something to look forward to. And it's exactly why Monday has become my absolute favorite day of the week. Is because I know I'm going to get to spend the night reading with y'all. I'm just going to put our raid target in right quick. We do have Jay's Corner TCG, Lost Hero, Vicariously. Now we could try Jay's Corner. I don't know if he's wrapping up quite yet. But it has been a minute since I've been in Jay's Corner, so we'll go in Jay's Corner. All right, there we are. We're in there, and if it does end, it ends. But I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your night. Thank you all for coming through, and always remember to go out and get everything that you set out to get, and don't let anything stop you. But it takes $0 to be a good person. So always do it through peace, love, and Pokemon, and thank you all for believing in ghosts. Have a beautiful rest of your night, and I will see you all on Thursday. Come and join us while we build some more of the Pikachu. Much love, y'all.